Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here to round out our day of Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition battles, just reacquainting ourselves with the rules with the day of small 500-point games. We are playing one 4-player Triumph Treachery battle. So a nice multiplayer game to get ourselves warmed up before we do the final multiplayer game for the campaign that we're running before everything shut down. These armies are actually going to be pretty easy for me to describe because 3 out of 4 of them are mine. One of the players is an older player who's just returning to the game after a while, so he's borrowing my armies. The other player just asked if he could use my goblins, which is fine. He's actually a goblin player himself. He's got a huge painted army, but I guess he didn't bring them and just felt like using the greenskins for this game. And then, of course, there's me, and as always, I drew my army randomly, and I got my Empire Force. And here they are. My general is Jerem McCroth, my warrior priest. He's just got his heavy armor and a shield. With him is a unit of 20 Free Company militia with full command. We've also got 10 handgunners with a marksman with a repeater handgun. I am well aware that for the points you could buy a marksman with a repeater handgun, you could just as easily get 3 more handgunners, which are probably better because you get 3 models, so that's 3 wounds as opposed to 1. But I had painted this guy recently for a Warhammer skirmish scenario, and I wanted to use him. That unit has a detachment of 5 skirmishing archers, and we also have a unit of 5 inner circle knights with a musician. The very observant among you may have noticed that the knights that I have there actually contains a standard bearer. There's no standard bearer in that unit. It was a mistake at the last minute. That's the old Voland's Venerators Dogs of War unit, and the standard looks almost identical to one of their normal lances. I just pulled it by mistake. So yeah, there's no standard. We played everything right rules-wise. I just grabbed the wrong model. And as I said, another player is using my Goblin Force. You may have seen this in the last battle report I posted. We have a Goblin War Boss with light armor and an enchanted shield. There are 19 Night Goblin Spears with full command and nets. There are 20 Night Goblin Shortbows with a musician and 2 fanatics. There is a Squig Herd with 10 squigs and 5 herders, and there is a Doom Diver. The third one of my armies to be used this game is the Ogre Kingdoms, which you would have seen 2 battle reports ago. We have an Ogre Bruiser with heavy armor, Iron Fist, and the Sword of Might. We have 5 Ogres with a Standard and a Bellower, 2 Mournfang with a Crusher, heavy armor, and Iron Fists, and 2 single units of Saber Tusks. And for the one army that is not mine, we have the Warriors of Chaos. This includes an Exalted Hero with just an additional hand weapon. He's got 12 Marauders with great weapons. There are 5 Chaos Warhounds and 5 Chaos Knights with full command. So there you have it, 4 armies at 500 points for this Triumph Treachery game. We'll be playing on this 4-foot by 4-foot board. Normally for Triumph Treachery you would play on at least a 6x4 board, but our armies are small, and we thought that 2 other players would be playing right next to us on the 8x4 board that I had set out. So we're just using half the table, 4-foot by 4-foot. It'll be fine for small armies like this. And for this game, we will be doing the Right of Conquest scenario. For this scenario, you divide up the board in 2-foot by 2-foot squares. In each square, there's an objective marker. The player with a unit closest to an objective marker at the end of the game gets 100 victory points. As far as deployment goes, you use alternating deployment. The first player to place a unit gets to choose a square, puts down a unit. The next player then chooses a square, puts down a unit. No units can be placed closer than 12 inches to an enemy unit. There is a random game length feature, which is a little bit too complicated to go into. Basically what it boils down to is, for us, on round 5, on a d6, the game will end on a 5 or 6. On round 6, it'll end on a 3+, and it'll automatically end at the end of round 7. Winner is the person who accumulates the most victory points, recorded with these victory point token paychest things. Unlike a lot of Triumph Treachery games we play, the terrain is actually pretty straightforward in this one. In the top center we have a mysterious forest, in the dead center we have an ordinary building, and down towards the bottom we have an Earthblood Mirror, which is a swamp that gives anyone inside of it a 6+ regen. There is an objective token just south of the forest. There's one in the middle of the swamp. There's one in the middle of the upper right-hand square. And there's one way down at the bottom in the lower right. The goblins managed to trick us all. They chose the lower right one. They managed to claim that objective. It's going to be hard to peel them away from that thing. The Warriors of Chaos are in the upper right, the Ogres have taken the upper left, and as usual, my guys get stuck with the area with the swamp. So a couple of things to point out as this game starts off. First off, turn order is determined randomly every round. Second, we will be using the treachery cards, but I didn't take notes as to when those things were played. Honestly, they don't have that big of an impact on the game usually. Just keep in mind that sometimes those things are played, they often don't affect very much, you know, a victory token here, a victory token there, maybe a small modification to hit rolls or charge distance or something like that. Finally, watch out for the Goblin player. I think he has won every multiplayer game that we have played. If you're looking for a good strategy for multiplayer games, try being the nicest person in the room. People don't want to gang up on the nice guy. This doesn't help me at all because in the normal gaming group I am by far the biggest jerk there. The other two guys, it's not really my fault, although I am kind of a jerk. The other two guys are just really nice. They are known as the Warhammer ambassadors. So smart money is on the Goblins at this point. And speaking of those guys, they draw the card to get the first turn. In Triumph Treachery, you declare an opponent for every phase of your turn. Your opponent for that phase is the only person that you can actually hurt. So the Goblin player declares the Warriors of Chaos player as their opponent, and he moves those unexpectrals, those Night Goblins with the short bows, forward towards the Marauders and unleashes 2 Fanatics at them. One stops about halfway there, the other one splashes through the unit and kills off 5 of them. So that's a big chunk of damage right away, and of course that Fanatic is getting kind of close to those Chaos Knights. Fortunately, the Marauders do pass their panic test. In further moves, the Squig Herd and the Spears with the Goblin Warboss in it advance towards my Empire forces. There's no magic phase for the Goblins, so we are on to the shooting phase. The Doomdiver of course targets the Chaos Knights, but it drifts off course but is able to land on the Marauders, killing another one of those guys. The Night Goblin Archers are in range, and so they add to the tally by killing another 2 Marauders off. That's going to force another panic test, which the Marauders again succeed. And with that, it's the end of the Goblin player's turn. We draw a card, and it's the Warriors of Chaos next. The Warriors of Chaos are a little bit mad about having all their fine Northmen getting killed off by these filthy Goblins, so they declare their opponent is the Goblins in the movement phase. Straight off the bat, the Exalted Hero is going to leave the unit and charge into the Night Goblin Archers. The reason he's doing this is because if the whole unit charged, they'd run through the Fanatic and probably kill themselves off. So it's just the hero charging off by himself. The Night Goblin Archers, though, do get a stand and shoot reaction, but because the hero hasn't left the unit yet, it's still directed at the unit itself. So in a panic, they shoot their bows at the Marauders, who are clearly up to something. They do manage to kill one of them off. Fortunately, not enough for a panic test, but then that Exalted Hero goes and rolls a double 1 for his charge distance, and so just kind of stumbles out of the unit and doesn't go anywhere and just stands there looking embarrassed. The Warriors of Chaos player is not having a great beginning of this game. You'll also notice that Night Goblin Fanatic is still having problems standing up. The remaining Marauders just kind of scoot sideways to the right, trying to move around that Fanatic. The Knights and the Hounds just back up a bit from the very threatening Ogres over on the left. And speaking of the Ogres, it's their turn next. They're going to declare the Warriors of Chaos as their opponent, and a Sabertusk is going to go and charge into the Chaos Hounds. The Ogre unit with the Bruiser just positions themselves somewhere behind there. They do not want to get charged by those Chaos Knights. The other Sabertusk moves towards my guys, and the Mournfang position themselves. Again, they don't really want to accept a charge from my Empire Knights either. So we go straight into the hand-to-hand combat phase, because again, no shooting, no magic. The Sabertusk and the Hounds are the only combat that we've got going on right now. Somehow the Hounds manage to pass their fear test. The Sabertusk still does fairly well and kills off 2 of them, but then those 3 remaining Hounds just go nuts and kill the Sabertusk in return. That's not what I expected to have happen, but it is finally some good news for the Warriors of Chaos player. So finally we're to me and the Empire. I've got Goblins approaching me from my right, I've got these Ogres maneuvering on my left. I'm going to declare the Ogre player as my opponent in the movement phase, and I'm going to charge my Knights into that diverting Sabertusk. The reason I do this is because I see that if I manage to overrun, I can crash into that Ogre unit and maybe just keep those guys busy for a while. The Knights do make the charge, which is great. One of them is going to pass through that forest. I don't remember what kind of forest it is. Whatever it is, it doesn't have a huge impact on the game, and I pass my dangerous terrain test. In remaining moves, I'm going to send my 5 archers out to try and just block up that Night Goblin advance. Slow those guys down as much as I possibly can. I'm going to try and solve that problem with handguns. The Free Company with Jerem in it, my warrior priest, we turn to the right to face those squigs bearing down on me. And then we'll go on to the magic phase. I'm the only person with a spellcaster, and my spells are only augments that can affect the unit that I'm currently in. So most of the time in the magic phase, I'm going to choose the Warriors of Chaos player as my opponent, because more than the other 2 players, he doesn't care what spells I get off. In fact, the more destructive spells that I can cast on my Free Company, the better, because the more guys that end up dead over on the other side of the table, well, that's to his benefit. So I get up some prayers in the magic phase, and we go on to the shooting phase. So I'm going to try out that brand new repeater handgun on those Night Goblins that are bearing down on that unit. And we do real well. We managed to kill off 5 of those guys. That's going to cause a panic test, which the Night Goblins go and pass. They do have that leadership 8 because the war boss is right there. But still, I'm kind of impressed. And while my knights often fail me on the field of battle, this time they do the expected and they kill off the Sabertusk for no loss. I was intending to overrun into the flank of the ogres, but disaster strikes the ogre player, and he has to make a panic test because the Sabertusk was within 6 inches when it was destroyed. The ogre bruiser has a leadership of 8, and they go and fail it, and they run straight off the board. And because he was my opponent in the hand-to-hand combat phase, I get all that points. The Sabertusk, the ogre, the general bonus. That gives me a gigantic early lead in victory points. The knights go and just continue on. They overrun straight forward. If nothing else, it gets them out of the charge arc of those Mournfang. But as far as I am concerned, they have done their job. They are deep in enemy territory. They are probably all going to die. But hey, these are Crusaders for Sigmar. They are doing their job. So round 1 is over. Round 2 is starting, and we have to determine a new turn order. So we gather up the cards, we draw one at random, and it turns out it's going to be me again. Age of Sigmar isn't the only place you can get a double turn. I do not know what I'm doing with all this good fortune, but I am going to run with it. No charges in the movement phase. The knights, I'm sorry I didn't take a picture of this, we're just going to swift reform and move right towards the Warriors of Chaos. The rest of my forces are absolutely happy where they're at. We cast some prayers, and then we're on to the shooting phase. With precision training, we fire another round of handgun bullets into the Night Goblin spears. And we do even better this time. We kill off 6 Night Goblins. That unit is down to less than half. Even better, here comes another panic test, and this time they fail. So the Night Goblins turn around and run back towards their lines. They are still on the table, but just barely. That takes a whole lot of heat off of my situation, and I'm feeling good. Not only that, those skirmishing archers are still alive. They expect to be dead by this point, so they go and fire their bows point blank at those squigs and actually manage to kill one. That is the end of my turn, and next up is the Warriors of Chaos. They choose the beleaguered goblins as their opponent, and the exalted hero finally manages to break into a jog and complete that charge into the Night Goblin archers. I believe the archers still would have gotten a stand and shoot, but no damage was caused. The Chaos Knights and the Hounds position themselves to divert my knights. Just textbook diversionary tactic. Just park the Hounds in front of my knights, so when we charge them and go cantering off after them, then I'm going to catch a charge from the Chaos Knights. You can't see it here, but the surviving 3 Marauders are creeping around one of those fanatics. So we're on to hand-to-hand, and I believe the Goblin player plays the Oil Slick card, which means that they dump a bunch of slippery stuff in this combat, and so everyone has to re-roll their hits in this combat round. Unsurprisingly, the Goblins don't manage to land a single wound on the Exalted Hero, but more surprisingly is that this Oil Slick doesn't slow down the Exalted Hero at all, and he butchers 4 of the Night Goblins. The Night Goblins are steadfast, but with their general running and only a leadership 5, they break from the combat and just take off. They easily outpace the pursuing Exalted Hero, who obviously has been skipping leg day. It's the Goblin turn next, and they find themselves in kind of a bad situation. They declare the Empire as their opponent so that the squigs can charge into those archers parked right in front of them. But then they have to go and rally their fleeing troops. The Night Goblin archers managed to rally, but it was all just the war boss telling him to cover his escape because the spears and the war boss fail their rally check on a 9 or less, and they are off the table. So this is bad news for the Goblin player. Obviously, this is putting him in a real bad spot, but it is fantastic news for me. First off, I don't have to deal with those spears of the war boss. Second off, because I was the opponent in this phase, because he wanted to charge my archers, I get the points for those spears and the war boss taking off. So that's another big chunk of victory points that I just sort of ended up with. The Fanatics just kind of spin around that objective, and the Marauders not really accomplishing much. I believe the Doomdiver just missed, which doesn't help anything. Finally, we get to the Hantan combat phase, and unsurprisingly, the Squigs eat all the archers for no loss. They decide not to overrun, though, because that's going to take them straight into the swamp, and he doesn't want to take a bunch of dangerous terrain tests. So back over to the Ogres for an extremely quick turn. All they can do is have those Mournfang turn around to face my Empire Knights. It's not looking great for those Knights. It's just a question of which super powerful unit is going to destroy them. But it's a new turn, and we shuffle up the cards, and I get the first turn again. This is going so well. Seeing the trap in front of me, but not liking what's behind me, I'm going to charge straight into it, and I declare a charge with the Empire Knights into the Chaos Hounds. If we're going to go down, might as well take some guys out with me. The Free Company, Warrior Priest, and Handgunners are all perfectly happy where they are. No need to get close to those Squigs that just ate our friends the Archers. So we sit there, cast some prayers, and then we go on, and the Handgunners are just having a field day. As revenge for killing off their detachment, they kill off 5 Squigs and 1 Herder. In the hand-to-hand combat phase, the Knights don't do great. They only kill off 2 of the Chaos Hounds. No Knights are killed in return. The Hounds do break, I do pursue them, but I don't catch them. And you can probably tell from this picture that I am in what you might describe as strategically a bit of a pickle. Chaos Knights on the flank and Mournfang in the rear. But that's it for my turn. We are on to the Goblin player's turn. The Squigs pass Animosity and declare a charge into the Handgunners. They are going to have to charge through the swamp, take dangerous terrain tests. They don't like the idea of going into a fully ranked unit of Free Company with a Warrior Priest and Prayers active, so they're going to try and eat those guys that have been shooting the tar out of their army for the last couple of turns. Unfortunately, that means they do have to survive a stand and shoot reaction, which continues to take a toll. The Handgunners are going to kill off 3 Squigs and 1 Herder. The Squig Herds are immune to psychology, so they don't have to take any panic tests, but that reduces the unit to just a single Squig and 3 Herders. All of a sudden, this is something the Handgunners might actually be able to defeat. The Squig Herd does manage to complete its charge, and they don't lose any more people as they stomp through the swamp. Remember the Fanatics? Well, one of them finally goes and dies, and the other just sort of whirls around, not accomplishing anything. Because I'm the opponent in the Goblin player's phase, even if that Night Goblin Fanatic does pass through any of these Warriors of Chaos units, it's not going to cause any damage. In the shooting phase, the Goblin player declares me as their opponent, which seems kind of spiteful, but I do get it. I feel like if the Warriors of Chaos player was their opponent, they could have shot their short bows at that Exalted Hero, charging up on him, and also fired the Doomdiver at the Chaos Knights. But instead, the Doomdiver takes a long shot into my Empire Knights. The shot lands, kills off 2 of my Knights. I do pass my panic test, though. It was not the way those Knights expected to die. In the close combat phase, 2 Handgunners are eaten, and we don't manage to cause any damage in return. However, our front rank is full at 5 models, and the Squig Herd is not, so we are steadfast, and we pass our leadership test of 8 or less because the Warrior Priest is nearby. And here is how the Knights expected to die. It is the Ogre turn, and they may be losing, but they are going to go out fighting the Mournfang charge into the back of the Empire Knights. So you may notice here that all of a sudden I've got 5 Knights. I think what happened is that we went into the Ogre player turn before realizing that the Goblin player had missed their shooting phase. So we went back and did that, and it all worked out. But anyway, the Ogres are charging into my 3 remaining Knights. And that should be the end of them, but man have they had a great game. And honestly, they continue to have a great game. Seeing their end is near, the Knights still get to strike first because their initiative is higher, and somehow they manage to punch 2 wounds onto the Mournfang, which is just insane. Then the impact hits come, and the Mournfang attacks and the Ogres and all that kind of thing. Only 2 of my Knights die, which isn't bad at all. Still, they're down 3 in combat resolution. That's a 5 or less break test, which they fail. They flee, the Mournfang pursue, they're run down. The Mournfang have to stop an inch away from that Chaos Hound because the Chaos player isn't their enemy in this phase. But yeah, good job, Knights. And now we're over to the Warriors of Chaos player's turn. This was the moment those knights were waiting for, and they charge into the flank of the triumphant Mournfang. The Marauders advance on the Doomdiver, the Exalted Hero advances on those Night Goblin Archers. The Chaos Hound requires a double 1 to rally, unsurprisingly it fails to do so and keeps running. And in the hand-to-hand combat phase, the Chaos Knights easily defeat the softened up Mournfang. The Mournfang break, the Knights pursue them off the table, and that's it for the Ogre Kingdoms. They have been completely tabled, so that player is going to be out of the game for the remainder. So we're on to round 4, and it's just me and the Warriors of Chaos and the Goblins, and I have a gigantic lead in victory points. So the treacherous Goblins and Chaos Warriors decide to form an alliance. So when the Warriors of Chaos draw their card to go first in this round, instead of continuing their charges into those vulnerable looking Goblin units, they turn to the left and start running towards my guys. If I were them, I would not turn my back on those Goblins. The Chaos Knights return to the table after chasing off the Mournfang, and now they're heading off towards my left-hand flank. And then we're over to the Empire turn. The Free Company and the Warrior Priests just start creeping through that Earthblood mirror. I don't want to march because it's difficult terrain. I just want to get into a position to possibly help out the handgunners if I need to, and perhaps more importantly, get away from those knights. Some prayers are cast, and then we're over to the hand-to-hand combat phase. One handgunner is killed, but I have been concentrating my attacks on that last remaining squig, and I finally kill him. The squigs at 2 attacks, weapon skill 4, strength 5 are by far the most dangerous thing in that combat. Now that he's gone, I'm feeling a lot better. In the meantime, this is a draw, but I think this is eventually going to go my way. So now it's the Goblin turn, and they just kind of hold their positions, which is a little suspicious. Kind of makes me think they're either suspicious of their Warriors of Chaos allies, or they're looking for the right time to betray them. In the shooting phase, I believe the Doomdiver misfires, which means it's not going to shoot this round or the next one. And to round off kind of a disappointing turn, no casualties are caused in the Handgunner Squig Hunter combat. So we are on to round 5, which could be the last round of the game. The Empire goes first again. I declare a charge with the Free Company into the approaching Exalted Hero of Chaos. Do I really want to fight this guy? No, not really, but I want to fight the Chaos Knights less, and by charging forward, this gets me further away from them. I do lose 2 guys as I stomp through the swamp. I'm not exactly sure which prayers I managed to cast this round, but I'm pretty confident I do get the Shield of Sigmar up for a 5-up ward save. With no shooting, we're straight on to the hand-to-hand combat phase. I currently have 2 close combats going on against different players. I am going to choose the Goblin player as my enemy. Even with the prayers, I'm still not real enthusiastic about fighting this Exalted Hero in close combat. So he gets backed off 1 inch, and the handgunners do not betray the faith that I put in them. They kill off all the remaining Squig Hunters for no loss. These handgunners have absolutely been heroes. We are back to the Warriors of Chaos. The Chaos Knights march up around that objective right there. And surprisingly, the Exalted Hero does not feel like charging into my Free Company. He said that with the Shield of Sigmar up, he just didn't like his odds. So he shuffles over to his left to try and line up a charge against those handgunners. And I don't know about this. I kind of think his odds would be better in hand-to-hand combat. To round out the turn, the Goblin player gets their turn. All they do is fix the Goblin Doomdiver. We roll a die on a 5 or 6, the game is going to end. We don't do it, and it continues on for at least 1 more turn. And the Chaos Warrior player is going first, which means he gets his turn before me. So here comes the charge. The Exalted Hero goes into the handgunners, but he still has to take a stand and shoot reaction, and he is mercilessly gunned down. Those Exalted Heroes are only toughness 4. They only got 2 wounds. With the armor-piercing handguns, he's only going to have a 6-up save. I was worried something like this would happen, and sure enough, it did. This means my Empire guys have actually killed off all 3 of the opponent's generals. I mean, 2 of them ran off the board, but hey, it still counts. The Knights attempt a charge on the rear of the Free Company, but crucially, they fail. That was kind of the last big thing that I was worried about. The remaining 3 Marauders just advance on my guys. In the Goblin turn, the Goblin Fanatics just kind of wander around. The Doomdiver fires at the Free Company and kills off 2 of them. Then we're back to the Empire turn. I didn't take a picture of this. The Free Company are going to declare a charge against those Night Goblin Archers. They don't complete the charge, they are too far away. For their part, the handgunners, knowing that the end of the game could be very close, they just reform into a long line to get themselves closer to that lower left objective than the Chaos Knights to get some victory points. And sure enough, we roll the d6, we get a 3+, and the game is over, and the Empire have absolutely run away with it. So obviously I'm really happy about this. It's nice to see the Empire do well. I definitely didn't think it was the most powerful list that I'd created for this day. I really enjoyed this game. In fact, I enjoyed the whole day. One of the nice things was, with all these little games going on, everyone managed to win at least one game. The Ogre Kingdoms player in an earlier game had used my vampire counts, and he won that game against the Wood Elves. And also, I'm just kind of happy that the Goblin player didn't win yet another multiplayer game. I think it was time for someone else, and luckily that person was me. So leave a comment below if you have any questions, observations, or concerns, and I will see you on the next one.